Right, morning once again. Welcome to another session of Help Desk. As mentioned in our previous communication, we'll be looking at the PoE as far as your assessments are concerned. So I believe we've already discussed task number 2, when obviously it comes to module content and submission, and obviously what is expected of you as far as the actual assessment there is concerned. I think I've discussed the PoE before, but I think it's important again to just revisit content so that we are all on the same page and actually have a recording of this to ensure that everyone is sorted as far as what is required of them for that particular assessment there is concerned. Now, remember, we've mentioned before that as far as this particular module is concerned, you're not actually coming in to sit for an exam, but ultimately you're going to be submitting a portfolio of evidence, which is literally the same as your exam for this particular module. The only difference is that you're not actually coming in to sit for it as far as submission or assessments or literal contributions to your final mark there would go. So you've got task 1 that has just been completed as far as marking and submission naturally is concerned. As far as that particular task, obviously, we also had a discussion on that in terms of what it was that you were supposed to literally contribute to at least enable you to get the relevant marks as far as that particular assessment there would go. And then you've got task 2 that is coming up possibly in the next 2 weeks. And then your PoE should be due, I think, sometime in July, if I'm not mistaken. So I think if you look at your PAS here, naturally, if there are any changes, I'm assuming that the campus will give you a heads up in terms of what's happening as far as these assessment the dates there are concerned. But obviously, as it stands right now, what we typically have is, let me just see if I can quickly share my screen here. So that's your that's the current PAS that I've got. So obviously, if there's any changes there, you can always give me a heads up in terms of the dates. But as it stands right now, I think if you focus on the help desk section, as far as submissions there would go, I think that's literally the 3rd column. So your help desk there, task 1 already submitted on the 31st. And then task 2 is due on the 18th of June. So like I'd mentioned before, that's just about 2 weeks from now. Again, there's already been a recorded discussion of that. So do yourselves a solid if you're not present for that session. There is obviously a clip on the YouTube channel that you can go and have a quick look at to understand exactly what it is that you need to contribute as far as that particular assessment would go. And then naturally the PoE is going to be due on the 14th of July. So again, like I mentioned a couple of moments ago, something we've discussed before, but just to make sure that we at least have some kind of recording of this to avoid any discrepancies that might arise in individuals mentioning that they don't remember this and that, or this particular this and that was not relevantly discussed. At least we've got a recording of this. Makes it a lot easier for us to revisit content should need be, to ensure that we all sorted in that regard. So if you look at the actual PoE there, let's see if you can just increase our size so that we've got, okay, so you've got a PoE that is naturally going to be 100 marks as far as mark allocation there is concerned. And actually your pass mark there is going to be 50%. And like we've mentioned before, should you not make that 50 and you're between 40 and 48, then you literally qualify for a resubmission. But naturally, if that resubmission is not up to standard, so literally if you fail that resubmission, then unfortunately you'll need to repeat the module as far as the entirety of assessments there would go. So like we've mentioned before, we've got different parts associated with the actual PO itself. So part A, part B, and part C. Each one of these particular sections are naturally important. And you've got specific content that you need to plug in as far as these particular assessment platforms would go to better your chances of naturally passing the module. So the first part there of your PoE is naturally contributing. You got 50 marks associated with that distinctive section. Like we mentioned before, you've got the first task that you've just or that you've submitted, I think roughly about a week or so back, that obviously will be marked, and then you'll be given the relevant feedback associated with the actual assessment there. All right, so whatever feedback that you will be given needs to be taken into consideration. I think I've mentioned this before, that if you're sitting at anything below 100%, then it's important for you to take cognizance of the actual feedback that you're given, and then literally redo that particular task accordingly, so that at least you plug in the relevant content that is there as far as this particular section of your PoE would go. So when it comes to your actual contributions, the actual original task that you've submitted that is marked with the actual feedback needs to be literally resubmitted. And then you've got a rework task, which means that you're going to be redoing that same task, taking into consideration the actual feedback that you were given. And then you will also have another document that will look at stating what it is that you've incorporated as far as or what it is that you were asked to literally improve and incorporate that particular content there. So it's all up to you in terms of how you want to look at submission of this. You can actually have 3 documents per task, or ultimately combine the entirety of the documents there to create one distinctive document for each distinctive task. So ultimately what you can do is then combine task 1 with the marked task 1 with the reworked task 1, and arguably with the document that is stating the content or the sections that you were asked to distinctively improve, or ultimately have separate documentation for that particular part as far as your actual PoE. They would go with the first document as the initial task with the feedback, the second document with a reworked configurations there, and then obviously the third document that is looking at what you literally improved as far as that particular task would go. So when it comes to submission, naturally, because you've got different sections associated with this PoE, I think it's imperative for you to actually have an appropriate folder that would then and literally have your content there accordingly. So you'd have part A, part B, and naturally part C incorporated, and then you will submit this obviously as a zipped folder on the VC Learn platform. I think obviously we are all familiar now in terms of how to submit assignments on this particular platform as far as your environments would go. So I think as far as submission there is concerned, it makes it a lot easier for you to have the different sections associated with your actual portfolio of evidence there, to make it a lot easier for whoever is going to be marking your particular assessment there to find the content that is distinctively relevant. So that's the first part as far as your actual PoE would go. And then you've got the second activity. So as far as this particular activity, I've asked you obviously to look at the different activities that are there on the VC Learn platform to obviously contribute to your ICE tasks there. I'm assuming that all of us have completed these. I think I mentioned that you were supposed to be looking at the entirety of the learning units associated with the module. So that's learning unit 1 all the way to 8. You've got activities there that are on VC Learn that you can typically complete for each one of those learning units. So there will be certain activities that will obviously require you to create a separate document and then obviously forward that or send it to my email. I think I've already mentioned that before. If you haven't completed these, I think you've literally run out of time now, because we had initially mentioned almost, I think, a month back that these tasks needed to be completed. So those particular tasks, they will obviously have the relevant feedback associated with them as well that you'll need to take into consideration. So ultimately, what you're looking at is looking at out of those tasks that I've asked you to complete, 4 tasks that obviously will give feedback on, and then you'll need to just have a short report, really, in terms of why these particular tasks were relevant in your understanding or furthering your understanding of module content as far as your specific setup would go. And as you can see with what we've got on screen, you've got an introduction in terms of the actual format of that basic report, the introduction, the list and description of the actual tasks selected, the actual knowledge that you got from completing or concluding these tasks, the hard skills acquired, and actually the soft skills acquired as far as that particular task there is concerned, or these particular tasks in general is concerned. And that's obviously contributing 20 marks to the actual 50 associated with your particular part A of the PoE. And then the third activity there is looking at obviously submission of all those 4 tasks into one consolidated report. So ultimately, it means that whatever 4 tasks that are incorporated there would obviously need to be plugged in to an actual document, a single document that would obviously look at listing and incorporating the actual tasks that you completed, inclusive of the actual work submitted. So the actual task itself, and then the content that you incorporated, and then that literally would complete and conclude the first part as far as your actual PoE section there is concerned. So I think if you were to look at it from a different point of view, just to ensure that we've got content there accordingly. Let's see if we can just quickly show incorporation of content accordingly here, so that we know exactly what we need to incorporate to avoid any discrepancies that literally might arise. So let's see if I can quickly share my screen again. So let's look at the screen here to make it easier. All right. So just for argument's sake, like I'd mentioned before, if you're going to obviously be incorporating content, let's just quickly create a folder here, and let's call that PoE. So obviously it will have your name and the actual student number, and PoE as obviously a title that is there. So just for argument's sake, we're going to incorporate this as an example. So I'll put this in as, Kincaid, and then whichever student number that you've got incorporated there, just for argument's sake, that being your student number, and HELP 5111 PoE. All right, so that's our particular folder that will have content associated with our distinctive submission there. And once you open up, obviously, that folder, within that folder, we're going to create another one that will have the first part. So we're going to have part A there, naturally, and then we'll have another folder with part B, and then we'll have another folder with part C. So this is obviously the actual structure associated with your distinctive PoE there. And then obviously within part A, you've got those 3 or literally 3 documents per task that you'll need to incorporate, or you can have these as one distinctive document that has the actual original with the feedback, the reworked, as well as the document that states what it is that you were asked to change there. And then naturally part B will have the content associated with part B, and naturally part C, same difference would apply. So what you then need to do if you were to go back to the actual desktop there, this particular file, once you've incorporated all content, you'll then need to zip that accordingly. So we can then create an actual zip file there. So once if you right click on the actual a folder itself, there's a context or drop down menu that appears. If you've got WinRAR installed, you can just then select add to PoE or whatever name that you've given there, .RAR there. But I think it's applicable for universality from a distinctive point of view to look at you just creating a zipped folder that you'll then look at submitting, just to ensure that we're all on the same page there. So once you've right-clicked on that particular folder, drop-down or context menu appears. In that context or drop-down menu, you've got the send to option. And then within that send to option, there's compressed zipped folder there. So if you click on that, ultimately, we've got this particular folder here that has been, or this particular zipped content. This is what you'll obviously then submit as far as your distinctive PoE would go. So you need to create that format first. And then once you've done that, this particular folder that we've just brought to this side here, or this particular document, is the one that you'll submit as your actual PoE on VC Learn there. All right, so I think that covers the way in which you'll need to submit this particular content as far as your submissions there is concerned. So I think we're good to go in that regard. So we're going to go back to the actual PoE again. What we are discussing here. There we go. So I think that covers part A, and obviously the 3 activities that are there. And then with part B, this particular section has been concluded by some students. Naturally, we had the first and the second group submit, I think, as recent as yesterday. And then we've got another group that's supposed to be submitting, should be on the 9th, as far as content would go. So once you've submitted, obviously you're going to be marked on that. But as far as the actual submission as well, in terms of the actual PoE at large, you will still need to submit the actual PowerPoint presentation that you'd have created in this regard. So literally, you will speak to your presentation. You're going to be marked on that. And then for the actual submission there, when it comes to the actual PoE itself, like we mentioned before, you've got that section or that folder that has part B there. What you will incorporate in that particular folder is actually the the PowerPoint presentation rather that you used to present this in class. So this particular section has already been incorporated, and naturally you've got an actual rubric associated with content. You'll be marked on the discussion covering the current state, the future state, your natural conclusion, and obviously the presentation incorporated there. So remember, we mentioned the whole concept of dress code as well, being part and parcel of what you're going to be marked on as far as that particular submission there is concerned. So that will fall within the presentation section as far as that a rubric there is concerned. So obviously we've gone through this content before. We're not going to waste too much time on this. It's just important that you remember that for the actual submission with the zipped file that we looked at a couple of moments ago, you'll need to just submit the actual PowerPoint presentation that you used for your physical presentation in class. So that does that for part part B there. And then you've got a self-evaluation part, which is part C. So this is just basically a reflection of what the module was all about, and also literally gauging your own understanding of what's happening with module content. Did you learn anything new? If it is, if that is the case, so what is it that you actually learned? If you didn't learn anything new, same difference applies. So this is more or less the whole concept of understanding or literally providing an understanding of the actual content that was distinctively discussed as far as the actual module there would go. So you've got an actual rubric that they've provided for you here. So if we to probably decrease. Okay, so that's the actual rubric that you've got. So self-evaluation, they've given you specific criteria: reflection, demonstration of learning, organization of report, clarity of report as the distinctive sections there. And then naturally, you've got 3 sections and looking at what have you learned, looking at were you on track, and understanding or literally looking at the whole concept of you having done exceptionally well in your own reflection as far as module content there would go. So ultimately, you're looking at that reflection. You're going to grade yourself out of 10, and then submit that. So what you're going to be doing is plugging in exactly the same table that is there. See if we can minimize it again so that we can view it accordingly. Okay, so there we go. So naturally, what you're looking at is incorporating this distinctive table. You populate it accordingly, and obviously you plug it into the part C of your particular submission there, and then naturally that would typically conclude what is happening as far as the actual PoE configuration there is concerned. So you've got a marking scheme that is there as well that gives you an idea exactly in terms of where marks are going to be allocated, how marks are going to be distributed. And like we've mentioned before, you're actually looking at 100% mark allocation. Your pass mark, like we've mentioned a couple of times before, is going to be 50% there. So that's the distinctive rubric that is going to be used as far as marking your particular PoE there is concerned. All right, so I think that literally covers that. Again, like I've mentioned a couple of times before, this is some content that we've gone through, but it's imperative for us to obviously revisit and have a natural recording of it, so that at least we don't literally have issues in terms of individuals not remembering or not knowing exactly what it is that they're supposed to do as far as this particular module there is concerned. Right. So I think that literally does that. Let me just see if we've got a couple of questions here. Someone's hand was up. Give me 2 seconds to possibly unmute. So obviously, in the meantime, feel free to type in chat there while we look at ensuring that everyone can have a say if need be as far as contributions they are concerned. I think it's also important to understand and remember that we've already concluded module content for this particular module itself. So I think the remaining sessions, they are literally just dealing with the whole presentation that needs to be done, and then also understanding exactly what's happening from an assessment point of view in terms of what is required of you and what you'll need to distinctively incorporate there. Right. Excuse me there. Just 2 seconds while we look at if anyone needs to put in all right. Okay, it looks like we've got something coming in on chat, yeah. What have we got? All right, so Patel, how and where do we check the actual feedback? So obviously when the assessment is marked, that assessment is going to be given back to you. So for both task 1 and task 2, once the assessments have been marked, they're going to be sent back to you, obviously on the VC Learn platform there. And that particular document that you receive will have the actual feedback. So you'll have your mark allocation on that particular document and the distinctive feedback associated with your submission. That is where you'll get the information that is relevant there. All right, does that answer your question there, Meet Kumar? Okay, cool. That's fine. Do we have anyone else with questions, contributions, and or concerns when it comes to the actual PoE? I think, like I said before, task 2 has already been discussed. So if you're not present for that particular session, just go ahead and have a quick look at the clip that's on the YouTube channel to understand exactly what it is that you need to contribute in that regard. But as far as the actual PoE is concerned, do we have any questions, contributions, and or concerns? Questions, contributions, and or concerns when it comes to the actual PoE discussion there, or PoE submission, whichever way. So Tina, the ICE tasks. Okay, so I think considering that, if I'm not mistaken, you probably joined this the group slightly later. So I think we can still make a plan in that regard in terms of you obviously ensuring that you submit those tasks. But for the guys that were there before, remember, I think we had more than enough time to ensure that these particular tasks were distinctly submitted. I think we even dedicated 2 sessions, in-house sessions, to complete these particular tasks. So there was more than enough time for you to look at concluding these. But in terms of you having joined this particular group late, then we can literally allow you to submit these particular tasks, but I think you'll need to do this before the end of the weekend, because Monday becomes your last day to actually submit content in that regard. All right, so does that answer your question there, Tina? So if you can submit these by Monday, we should be good. All right. Do we have any other questions, contributions, and or concerns from anyone? Questions, contributions, and or concerns from anyone as far as the actual PoE there is concerned? All right, so I think that literally covers that. So just another heads up again, as far as the actual tasks there would go. Submission, I think as far as mock submission there is concerned, it's going to be today. So like we mentioned before, my general assumption there is everyone has completed those to ensure that we are all on the actual same page. I think just one of your colleagues there, because they literally joined the group late, will have up until the end of the weekend to ensure that they submit all the tasks that are relevant in that regard. All right, but otherwise, if we don't have any questions, contributions, and or concerns, I think that literally does that as far as the actual PoE discussion there would go. Like I mentioned before, the session going to be is actually recorded, so we'll upload that on the YouTube channel. Should you need to look through this content again, you have enough time to do that. So just take cognizance of the actual due dates, just to make sure that we're all on the same page there, just to avoid any discrepancies in that regard. So like I'd mentioned before, going back to what's on screen currently, just focus on the help desk submissions there. the 18th of June is the due date for your task 2. Again, should there be any changes, I'm assuming that the campus will obviously give you adequate heads up in that regard. And then submission for the actual POE itself is going to be on the 14th of July. All right. So if we don't have any questions, contributions, and or concerns rather, okay, got something else coming in from on chat here. Okay, so Patel, what you got for us? Right, so meet Kumar. Right. So obviously the files will need to be compressed there, because remember, you're submitting it as a single document per se. You're not submitting multiple documents for your POE submission there. It's one distinctive document that you'll need to submit as far as this particular POE there is concerned. That's the reason why that particular format needs to be incorporated. And I'm not so sure why this would be an issue there, Jean-Paul, because if you're using, regardless of whatever type of system that you're using, at the moment you incorporate your folders there, as far as submission is concerned. Remember, you can't submit a folder as is, as far as your VC Learn platform there is concerned. So that's the reason why that particular file would need to be compressed as far as submissions would go. Does that make sense for you there? Okay, cool beans. All right, so that's that there. Do we have any other questions, contributions, and or concerns there from anyone? Contributions, concerns, or questions when it comes to this POE submission? Right. So I think that does that. I think once again, just confirm and make sure that you've submitted those activities as far as the actual ICE there is concerned, the ones from learning units 1 to 8. And then we should be good to go as far as content there is concerned. I think, again, to avoid sounding like a broken record, literally marks are going to be submitted as far as those particular ICE tasks would go today, but only one individual, like I mentioned before, is the one that is literally missing out on that because they literally joined the group late. All right. So if we've got no questions, contributions, and or concerns, I think we can call it a day. Should there be any questions that end up arising a little later on, you can always pop me a mail and then we'll converse on that particular platform. All right. Thanks for attending. We'll see you in the next one. Cheers.